Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journeys, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2024. And that brings us to a release which has been designated by Criterion at SPY number 1223, and this is described as being from the year 2021. And the name of the director and showrunner is Barry Jenkins, for this is a series, a 10-part series, or 10 chapter or 10 episode series. It's again described as being from the year 2021. And the name of the work is The Underground Railroad. This is the series, the Amazon Prime series, 10-part series, which is described as being from the year 2021. And this is based upon the novel by Colson Whitehead. And we have here a series which has, as part of its, or included in its really brilliant cast, people like Thuso Mbedu and Chase W. Dillon and Joel Edgerton and others. This is a series that I was not able to watch until the occasion of this Criterion release. And now, sitting here in front of you, my dear friends, talking about this, I have seen this series twice through, and I can say that I am left stunned. I am emotionally affected by this. This is a real powerful work. Again, this is the Amazon Prime series, now available on physical media courtesy of this great Criterion release. And it is this work, which is The Underground Railroad. I was trying to figure out how I should approach this discussion, because this is a 10-part series. And but I don't want to go into too many specific plot details, again, for the benefit of those who have not yet seen this work. But let me just then suggest that maybe what I'll try to do going forward is I'll try to just speak very generally about the series overall. And then I'll try to speak, again, not touching upon specific plot points, but I'll try to speak with a little bit more specificity on each of the episodes, or each of the chapters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But again, going through the chapter-specific discussions, I will avoid, or I will endeavor to avoid any specific plot points. It'll be a little bit challenging, but I'll see what I can do. But I do feel like I feel more comfortable, at least endeavoring to talk about some of the episode specific stuff to the point I'm able to, again, with also the attempt to avoid any specific plot spoilers, again, for the benefit of those who have not yet seen this work. So that's what I'll try to do and arrange this video discussion that way. And then at the latter half of this discussion, what I'd like to do is I'd like to focus on the supplements that are part of this release from Criterion. So that's the way I'd like to arrange this going forward. So just very briefly, we'll talk a little bit later about the specifics of the Criterion release, but this is a 4-disc Blu-ray release, which is what I have here. There are a number of really interesting supplements that are included here, and I can't wait to talk to you about them, including also some of the paraphernalia and there's a graphic novel as well, or a graphic novel excerpt or chapter. Maybe that's a way to describe it. But in any event, it'll be that and many other things are part of the overall package of this Criterion release, including, I should add, a really interesting commentary track or tracks, as well as some another film. And then also, again, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. It's a really fascinating set of supplements, which really reveal a lot about the film and really underscore a lot of the thematic aspects of this powerful work, as well as further showcasing the great genius and craft of the artists and filmmakers and professional artists involved, including, of course, the great Barry Jenkins. This is, again, the director and showrunner, Barry Jenkins' work. So this is it's a really great release from Criterion. So I can't wait to speak with a bit more specificity about it later. And then now let's turn to the story and or the plot structure. So again, very generally first, and then we'll go into a little bit more specificity with each of the chapters going forward. But if I were to make just some brief comments overall about the series now, I could say that, again, watching it through the first time, I was not aware of the Colson Whitehead novel in terms of not knowing what the specific story was. So watching this and watching the story unfold I was on edge because it's a very intense story. It's a story that is focusing in on our main character, one of our main characters, who is the Tuso Mbedu character, who is Cora. She is a slave in the 1800s in the southern part of the United States. When we first meet her, she is in the state of Georgia on a plantation, and she is there also with other slaves on the plantation, and so we get to meet some of them as well as the slave owners and the situations that are confronting our main characters, Cora in particular, as we see them in this work, The Underground Railroad, are very intense, and the displays of cruelty and viciousness are dramatically told in a way that is showcasing the real horrors that are confronting these people, and Cora being one of them. And the situations are, there's a sense of the grotesque, there's a sense of the unjust, there's a sense of the wicked, and also there's a sense too of what can be beyond, or is there a way to escape this? And thus brings rise to the title of the work, which is The Underground Railroad, which is making reference to United States history during this time in terms of escape routes for slaves in the South, with the hopes of going from certain, say, safe houses, hidden safe houses, from point to point to point, with the objective of hopefully reaching a place where they might find a sense of freedom, or find a kind of a safe haven and freedom. The Underground Railroad being this sort of set of routes in this way, as showcased in United States history during this time. Well, what this work does, which is a really fascinating aspect of Colson Whitehead's imagination, as well as Barry Jenkins' imagination, is it takes this concept of the Underground Railroad and makes it into an actual underground railroad. And so what we have is an actual set of underground tunnels that are hidden, except for the select few who know about this and who are using these routes to try to enable some of the slaves in the South, such as Cora and Georgia and other places, to try to go to a different place in the hopes of finding some kind of safe haven and escape from the horrors of their previous, say, living standards. And so this is bringing forth a real fascinating mixture of what one might call reality and historical precedent on the one hand, and also a sense of narrative fiction woven sense of, I think the phrase that's used is magical realism. In other words, using elements that have a fantasy type of feeling or spirit to them, that are also used to, in a way, buttress or to maybe set aloft or maybe highlight or intensify those aspects of a kind of a historical context, if you will. So using, say, aspects of the fantasy and artifice in order to emphasize or highlight the reality, as it were, as being depicted in this narrative depiction or this narrative story of the Underground Railroad. So it's a real fascinating mix of different, say, times and notions and ideas. And I should say times too, because what Barry Jenkins and Colson Whitehead and others do here, um, Colson Whitehead with the novel, and then Barry Jenkins with his adaptation. What they do here is really fascinating. They take things that might be seemingly sort of anachronisms, things that are taken from different time periods, uses of songs, maybe aspects of the environment, maybe geographical or not geographic, architectural designs, and technological advancements that are filling in some of the details in the periphery of each of the episodes, thus creating a sense of a type of timelessness that is interwoven into the story that is still set in a time and a place which has which has connections to historical contexts and historical backgrounds, that being the United States South in the 1800s. But that interweaving is really fascinating. That it creates a real captivating quality, a poetic quality to all these stories, while also giving us on the counterbalance a sense of the grim realities that are again the focus of the stories here in terms of Cora and others. And so, speaking of the characters, I think another of the great strengths of this work is the character arcs that we are able to witness as we watch this series, The Underground Railroad. And the characters, there's so many characters that we meet. But what we can say is perhaps our main character, or one of our main characters, is the Cora, who is portrayed by Thuso Mbedu, who is it's a brilliant performance, by the way. It is her character arc involves a lot of things that are very intense. There is a lot of physical and emotional and spiritual adversity that is on display in terms of Cora's own trajectory throughout these episodes. And Thuso Mbedu's performance has a kind of there is a spiritual brilliance about the way that Thuso Mbedu portrays Cora. There's a dignity, and there's also this curiosity, and also there's a sense of confusion and almost a sense of the heftiness and weightiness of responsibility that she feels as we go from story to story to story. It is an incredible performance of an incredible character, Cora. And one of the fascinating things about the Underground Railroad as we watch this is what happens to Cora and how she gets from place to place to place. And as I say, maybe that has to do with some of these aspects of the Underground Railroad that I spoke about just a moment ago. Other aspects too about the various states that we go to, because it's set in not just one place, but it's set in many different places throughout the South, many different states, many different locales, and therefore many different characters that we will meet along the way, thus creating a kind of episodic nature to the series, while also giving us a sense of a focal point, that being the story of Cora primarily. But that's not the only story, that's not the only character arc that we are involved in as we watch this. We are also involved with the story of the Joel Edgerton character, who's Ridgway, Arnold Ridgway, and then Chase W. Dillon's character, who's Homer, and they form a really, really fascinating a duo, if you will, kind of counterbalance to Cora's own story. And I mean that word very, very directly, because it is among other things, this is a film that is also a chase film. This is also a film about characters pursuing other characters. And Ridgway and Homer they are slave catchers, and they are pursuing Cora, who is on the run, who is escaping from the place where she was an owned slave in Georgia on the plantation, and now she is escaping. And the story, therefore, of the series is one of the pursuers chasing or pursuing the pursued, and whether or not they will catch up with her or not, this is one of the thematic and points of tension that give rise to one watching this as we watch this series, The Underground Railroad. It is a really fascinating and sometimes quite challenging, or oftentimes quite challenging depiction, and how these character arcs merge and submerge and conflict and diverge, etc. It's one of the great tension points of watching this 10-part series, The Underground Railroad. Plus, we get to know a little bit about, we get to know a little bit about all the other characters, but for example, we get to know a little bit more about Joel Edgerton's Ridgway and his background and his childhood and his relationships with other characters, children, generation to generation relationships, as well as his relationship with Homer, Chase W. Dillon character. This is another fascinating aspect of this, which I'll try to get into a little bit more as we proceed with this discussion. But I mentioned parents and children. There's also something that is haunting Cora and Ridgway and others here, that being the past and what happened to Cora and Cora's past. Or specifically, there is a character too who is sometimes not featured prominently, but she is there from the very first episode, and that is the mother of Cora, who is Mabel. And one of the tension points of this series is what happened to Mabel? What is the story of the mother who is no longer there? And this also motivates Ridgway's character. This also maybe motivates Cora's character to a certain extent. And also it provides a kind of parallelism between the story of Cora, the daughter, and what is happening to her now as we watch the series. That's one parallel track. And then the other parallel track is what happened to her mother, what happened to Mabel in the past that is resulting in what is happening with Cora now. And that is, and I mean that's also specifically in terms of how Ridgway feels about Cora and the intensity with which Ridgway pursues Cora. Has a direct link to Ridgway's understanding or feelings about what happened to Mabel, the mother, as well as Ridgway's own feelings about his own, say, family and his own, say, inner circle. And I'm speaking about details that will emerge throughout this story, specifically about maybe Ridgway's own relationship with his own father. So their generation to generation conflicts that are parallel, that are set in a parallel way, that also drive towards a kind of inexorable conclusion. Again, along the way, we meet different communities, we meet different people and their concerns, and there are maybe secrets, there are tensions that arise. Cora's presence also lifts or intensifies the proceedings. And so we are left wondering what will happen to not just Cora, but also the people that we meet and begin and learn about and learn to care about and feel for and empathize with and sympathize with and really want to support and see people succeed at the end of the day. But part of the, or a lot of the intensity of this work, The Underground Railroad, is understanding that, again, in this era, 1800s, the South, the setting which this series takes place, we understand that there is a lot of cruelty, there's a lot of violence, and there is a lot of, and I mean this in terms of physical violence, and there's also in terms of emotional violence, and the tolls that are taken, and the sort of spiritual damage, I think, that we see a lot of people undergo and incur throughout this. I mean, it is really tough to watch sometimes, an incredibly tough watch. And what I think, therefore, Barry Jenkins and company do so well is they show us this, and they do it in a way that is done, I think, it's not overly gratuitous or anything like that. There are intense scenes. There are a lot of intense scenes. But we also feel them in the emotional performances and the emotional tolls that are taken. And we see it in the faces, and we see it in the eyes, and we see it feel it in the voice and just the looks, the gazes, which is another key point of Barry Jenkins' work here, The Underground Railroad. The looks as a kind of witness to history on the one hand, as told through the story, the Underground Railroad, again using aspects of art and fantasy to create this tale, which is meant to augment and to further highlight and intensify aspects aspects of the story that have their connections with the historical context. These moments, I think, that Barry Jenkins and company are sharing with us as we watch this, I think they create a questioning within us. They ask us to really recognize a kind of horror and the intense degree to which cruelty and viciousness can exist in this world. It is sometimes, I watched this series twice now, thanks to this Criterion release, and every time I can say that I'm left. How can I describe it? I'm left with a sense of shock and being stunned to the point that I feel like sometimes some of these scenes they really almost scratch out, or like part of my soul is hollowed out as I watch this film. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it has that real visceral effect to it. And we also know that a lot of things that are left hidden and that we understand is happening off screen. This is also very intense as well, because we're reminded that this is the environment that is confronting Cora and others that we meet, and it is as shown in the story of the Underground Railroad. It is a very cruel world indeed. But it's also one where we have these aspects of, again, the characters, Cora, her story, and others who are trying to escape this in a way that they are able to, and learn along the way, and try to recover a sense of their own self and dignity along the way, and trying to find a sense of who they are along the way, a kind of emotional freedom as well as a physical freedom and spiritual freedom. This is also key to the story arcs of the Underground Railroad. And at the same time, these points are told so brilliantly with a sense of flourish. The camera work and design, it's top notch. I mean, there are some moments of visual flourish that are amazing in terms of way that time is reversed or sped up. Also, the way that the camera captures the intimate faces, as well as the grand vistas of the scenery and background. I mean, there are some shots here that are epic, absolutely epic. And then also the intimacy of the moment is also really tender and caring. And we have, as I say, too, the way that this film interweaves time and space. Sometimes we might have purposeful use of anachronisms, things that are sort of out of place in terms of the time period, but they work so well in terms of a poetic and artistic choice, all the way down to architectural design. Sometimes there might be a little technological advancements that are more 20th century rather than 19th century. Again, musical choices as well. This is some songs that are used also are displaying the sense of using different time periods to tell this story, which has kind of universal accessibility in the hands of Barry Jenkins and company. This is a really powerful work, the Underground Railroad. So this is my general take on the series, episode 1 or chapter 1 all the way up to chapter 10. Each is approximately an hour, although they vary in running time. Some episodes run a little bit less than an hour, but it goes by really quickly. And I was absorbed from start to finish. I really was, and I saw it twice. And I'll try to see it again, although I do need some recovery time because it is a very intense experience. And I think along the way, I find myself very much in awe of this. So these are my general thoughts on the series, The Underground Railroad, from director and showrunner Barry Jenkins. But now let us turn our attention to some of the specific episodes. So again, I will try to avoid specific plot points, but I'll do my best to discuss. It'll be a little bit of a difficult challenge for me, but I'll do my very best to talk about the episodes, and then we'll talk about the supplements in the latter half of this discussion. So sorry, just before I go into the specific episode discussions, I should say this. So actually, I'm now speaking here, and while I'm making this video, in fact, I've already finished the episode specific discussions, and I said before that I would try to make it spoiler free, but upon doing them, I realized that that was impossible, and so the following episode specific discussions will contain some mild spoilers to the episodes. So what I'll do is I'll be sure that there's a spoiler banner on the screen as I talk. And so if you're wanting to avoid spoilers, just be sure to, you can fast forward to the video, to the next part of the video that doesn't have the spoiler banner on it anymore. I hope you can forgive me about that. But I did my best to speak as vaguely as possible, again, even within the context of episode by episode discussions. I tried to, I had to speak about some spoilers because it was just the nature of what happened last week, that kind of thing. But even within the context of those episodes, I tried to make it as vague as possible. So I'll also have chapter breakdowns, timestamp breakdowns. So if you want to skip to a specific episode discussion, you're welcome to do so. But and also have a spoiler banner somewhere on the video screen just to give you a heads up about the spoilers. Again, minor spoilers. I don't go into too many details about it because I don't want to give away everything. So I've tried to be as vague as possible. But where I couldn't avoid it, I had to mention a little bit. So, mild spoilers abound in the following episode-specific discussions. But as soon as the episode-specific discussion is over, the spoiler banner will be removed, and we'll talk in the latter half of this video about non-spoiler stuff, such as the Criterion release and supplements, etc. So, I hope you enjoy. Thank you very much. And so now let us turn to the chapters or episodes. And the first chapter is Chapter 1, Georgia. And this is, I understand, directed by Barry Jenkins with the script or written by Barry Jenkins, and teleplay by Barry Jenkins, excuse me. And we have, again, the introduction, a lot of things. First of all, we have a kind of introductory, say, prologue part, which seems to be announcing a number of things that we might see throughout the series. A lot of images that are shown to us at first that seem maybe that are announcing a kind of mystery or sense of mysteries about who these people are and what is going to happen as we watch this series. And it's told in a really fascinating, compelling way, sometimes with reversed photography, sometimes with a sense of sudden jarring shots that just seem to be out of the blue. But again, creating a compelling sense of dramatic tension, which will then carry us through the rest of this chapter 1 and then through the rest of the chapters. And then this chapter 1 is titled Georgia. And I think that's very apropos because my understanding is that, among other things, this chapter is set in Georgia. And we are introduced to Cora and other people in this story. So specifically Cora and Caesar. And they are slaves on this plantation in Georgia. And we understand that it is very grueling, very hard, incredibly difficult work, physically and emotionally. And that is due to, we are privy to acts of cruelty in terms of the plantation owners. I mean, there are some real intense moments involving other slaves that are trying to run away and what happens to them when they get caught. And so we are confronted with the vicious realities, as well as Cora and Caesar. And so this begins a kind of journey, if you will, of the story or the impetus or the motivation to want to escape. And thus Cora and Caesar trying their best to find a way out. And while being confronted with the horrors and the risks of, again, if they get caught along the way, then they will likely be killed or likely undergo some very, very painful and horrific torture. So this is the risk. And so a lot is on the line. Life stakes are on the line. but it then is the motivation for, again, Cora's journey and Caesar's journey, which involves, again, a lot of danger and risk along the way, a lot of death along the way as well. But they do reach a kind of destination in terms of the Underground Railroad, and so we will see how this proceeds going forward. But another aspect too is because of the circumstances involving Cora's escape, then we have the introduction of Arnold Ridgway and Homer. This is the Joel Edgerton and Chase W. Dillon characters, respectively. And we understand that they are tasked through certain motivations, which are perhaps not so clear at first, but they might reveal themselves along the way a little bit later. They are tasked with pursuing and catching Cora, and then returning Cora back to Georgia, and to certain circumstances that, again, are revealed as we watch this episode. So everything is set in terms also of a kind of, again, the larger than life metaphor, which is now manifest in a kind of reality of within the context of the series itself, the Underground Railroad, that being the Underground Railroad. So everything is set. The pursuit is set. The dramatic points of tension are set. And the characters, the main characters that we will meet, are set here. And then now everything begins in terms of the pursuit and the chase and Cora's journey throughout many different states, and the efforts of Ridgway and Homer to pursue her and to capture her. So it's presented here in this episode, or Chapter 1, Georgia, done in a really bravura, stylistic way, with some really stunning moments. And I should say too, one of the stunning moments comes in terms of the credits. And this is a thing that we will see throughout this series, and how the credits are used, and music choices are used in the credits that really tell a kind of story in and of themselves, while also borrowing from different time periods in this great, wonderful, purposefully anachronistic way. So this is really, really great. So again, it grips you from the very start. Really, really gripping stuff. So this is Chapter 1, Georgia. And then we go into Chapter 2, which is titled South Carolina. And then from the outset, from the very start, we are thrust in a seemingly different world than the world that we had seen in the previous chapter, Georgia. And so South Carolina, it seems to be an idyllic place. It seems to be a place of quote unquote high culture, end quote, or a sense of peace and a sense of freedom, and a sense of the arts and theater and museums, and architectural advancements, and also technological advancements in terms of even a skyscraper-like building, or uses even of electricity in this manner. So there seemed to be a sense of technological and cultural and maybe political advancements in this place that we are thrust into immediately, while also understanding that our heroes, our protagonists, Cora and Caesar, we understand, are in this community, seemingly escaping from the horrors that were from the earlier episode, or the earlier chapter. But we also understand that as things progress throughout this running time, there are creeping in to the proceedings a sense of unease, a sense of not quite sure if things are as idyllic as they might seem on the surface. Certain cracks begin to appear, or are identified, and it's up to Cora and Caesar to try to figure out what is going on here in terms of the actual aspects and the facets of this community, and whether it is indeed a community where they can find a sense of safe haven and belonging, and freedom, or whether that safe haven or belonging and freedom are mere artificial illusions that might shatter at any moment. And so here arises a sense of the dramatic tension that is still there. It is a through line from Chapter 1, Georgia. And although the community and storyline might feel, and the whole mood of the piece might feel different, there is still that underlying sense of threat and menace that might come to the fold, especially when we understand, again, from the earlier episode, that Cora and Caesar are still being pursued by the relentless and the unforgiving nature of Joel Edgerton's Ridgway and his companion, Chase W. Dillon's Homer. So if and when they come into the proceedings, we understand that perhaps those illusions might not just be identified as illusions, but they might indeed disintegrate and crack and blow up before our very eyes. As the story progresses. Thus, also understanding too that the Underground Railroad perhaps finds another way in terms of the way in which it is the basis by which Cora and others are able to move from place to place to place. So, in that way, we have this chapter 2, which is South Carolina. Once again, another bravura showcase. It feels like a different period of time almost, but it's still the same story. And there are many levels of surprise and revelation that occur here. Again, Barry Jenkins and company using to great effect the kind of bravura visual storytelling that is so intimate at the same time, uses of anachronisms that are highlight certain levels of nuance and irony so well. The performances are, again, top notch. They continue to be top notch, and again, the harrowing nature of some of the ways in which are the characters that we have grown to really love and care for, what happens to them, or the risk of what happens to them, it really carries us through in terms of the intensity and suspense and dramatic tension. This is another great episode. So this is chapter 2, South Carolina. Before I go to chapter 3, I should say, I forgot to say, I'm so sorry. Chapter 2, South Carolina, was written by Jacqueline Hoyt and Nathan C. Parker, and then directed by Barry Jenkins. And then now let's go to chapter 3, which is written by Allison Davis and directed by Barry Jenkins. And this is North Carolina. And so we have, again, we understand now that there's this conceit of the Underground Railroad being this hidden railroad route that is known only to a select few, and it's used as a means of escape from point to point to point. And so this is one of the fascinating aspects of the series and also of the novel, the Colson Whitehead novel. But now we have a new locale, a new sense of escape, a new locale. North Carolina, thus giving rise to the title of the chapter. But we also have a different set of characters, different set of community, a different community altogether, and we have a new what's the phrase? New aspects that are revealed, while also giving rise to a sense of the threat and menace that will likely confront Cora and the other characters that we come to meet and care for throughout this. And so this gives rise to other characters, excuse me, such as Martin Wells, and how Martin Wells and Ethel, husband and wife Martin and Ethel, what they do in terms and their own varying viewpoints as to how they are trying to help Cora. And there's this way in which the house in this particular community is used, their house, and specifically the rooms in their house and the attic. And these, it also gives rise to aspects of how this community views elements of religion and spirituality, and how that their viewpoints of spirituality and religion inform their own lives and their own perspectives. And that also includes their perspectives on slavery, and to what and that also informs, again, specifically the character arc of Martin and Ethel, and specifically Martin vis-a-vis his relationship with Cora, and maybe other characters that we will meet along the way. So there are turns and surprises that are quite intense indeed. And again, the Underground Railroad series is one where we don't have just Cora, and we also have a number of characters as well, but in terms of the main triumvirate of characters, as it were, it's not just Cora, but it's also Homer and Ridgway, because we understand that they are still on the hunt. They are still in pursuit of Cora. And when they arrive, because we know inevitably that must happen in terms of the dramatic impetus of this work, if and when that happens in this story, again, we see the extent to which the extremes are potentially met, and they are realized, and sometimes in a very frightful and a sudden shift of dramatic, say, propulsion that creates real intense scenes indeed. I mean, throughout this work, we do see characters that are very cruel and very mean, incredibly mean. And I think chapter 3, North Carolina, this is one where we see a number of examples of this. I mean, there are some moments of surprise, and there are also moments of cruelty, and there are also moments of chance and fate that are just that can lead characters to being saved, or they might lead characters to being doomed. And maybe it's just the fate or luck or chance that might have turned the tide one way or another. I mean, that has a sense of hope and suspense. It also has a sense of dread and tragedy if it goes the other way. So, and it's all here within the space of this chapter 3, North Carolina. There are also moments, and I should say, to how Cora, we really feel the weight of her emotional and spiritual suffering. It's not just her suffering that we feel, it's also the way in which she seems to be feeling responsibility for a lot that she is witnessing, a lot that of the people that she is meeting along the way, including another key character that we meet as well, and this is the character of Grace. So this becomes a really important part of this story arc. So I think, yes, Cora's development, or Corazon's character or spiritual journey, is also on display in this chapter 3, North Carolina. Another brilliant, brilliant chapter. And so let's continue with chapter 4, The Great Spirit. This is directed by Adrienne Rush. I'm sorry, this is written by Adrienne Rush and then directed by Barry Jenkins, excuse me. And here we have a very fascinating turn again. I mentioned before about how this series, The Underground Railroad, can also shift in terms of time and space. And here is, I think, a really prominent example of this, because we are suddenly shifted into the early life of Arnold Ridgway. And we understand that when he was a young man, he was growing up, and his one of the key relationships of his life, we understand, is with his father, Ridgway Sr., who is portrayed by Peter Mullen. And so we have one of the really gripping turns of this series, namely another example of the sort of generation-to-generation, parent-to-child relationship, that being between Ridgway Sr. and Ridgway Jr., or the character that we will meet later in the form of Joel Edgerton's performance in other episodes. But this is really fascinating because we see, among other things, again, how the series, The Underground Railroad, approaches characters and their view of religion and spirituality, and how it informs their worldview and their life view. And we see this with how, for instance, Peter Mullen's Ridgway Sr., how he views this concept, or the notion, or the feeling, or the philosophy, or religious or spiritual existence, if you will, and how it informs his own life and his own livelihood. And the idea is the Great Spirit, and this thing that this feeling, or this notion, or this idea, or this worldview that really lends itself to perhaps a sense of maybe compassion, a sense of responsibility. And it also has a direct impact in terms of how Ridgway Sr. seems to be viewing relationships with African Americans, in terms of during this time, in terms of people who are free, and how he interacts with those characters in the context of this chapter, The Great Spirit, and also how young Ridgway, Arnold Ridgway, the son, how he is seen to be reacting in kind or not to issues of slavery, and how it is in maybe in connection with, or perhaps from his point of view, in contradiction to the Great Spirit worldview of Ridgway Sr., and how these tensions between father and son further widen to the point of what might happen, or how these tensions between father and son may or may not have played a role in what has happened to Arnold Ridgway, and what we find Arnold Ridgway doing right now as he is pursuing Cora in the present time of the series Underground Railroad. And so, for these and other reasons, this episode, The Great Spirit, I think we're already finding so many. If you think about just going from chapter to chapter to chapter to chapter so far, we've only been through 4 chapters, but still, it seems to be going in so many different places while giving us this through line that, again, it's shifting temporal time and space, excuse me, but it's also giving us a through line, which I think is so fascinating, gripping, and also giving us details about the pasts of these characters to the point of creating a sense of a real depth, even in the scope of all the horrors that are happening in terms of the main through line of the plot of the series, that being the pursuit of by Ridgway of Cora. But we get to see a little bit about who Arnold Ridgway is in the context of his relationship with Ridgway Sr. So there are, I think, ways in which one might view this episode in terms of, again, religion, spirituality, maybe a sense of morality or immorality, good, evil, or maybe that space in between, as well as comments and commentary on from the perspective of Ridgway Sr. and Jr., their viewpoints and differing viewpoints, perhaps, on slavery and labor, etc. So, and how it affects their lives going forward. So, this is, I think, a really tour de force, performance, tour de force episode with tour de force performance. I should say, Fred Hetchinger plays the young Arnold Ridgway here. There is a sense of the sensitivity, but also the confusion, and also choices that are made here too as well. I want to emphasize. What are the choices that we see young Arnold Ridgway make in this episode, and how can we see those choices defining his life as we see him, again, grown up in the form of Joel Edgerson's great performance as well. So this is another intense turn, a really, really sweeping turn, and again, some little things, little details that occur here that may or may not have rippling effects going forward. And also too, again, a really interesting parallel too, because again, in the back of our minds, if we think about chapter 1, we understand that there might have been something to do with Cora and her mother. And here in the Great Spirit chapter, we have aspects of the relationship between another parent-child dynamic, that being father and son here, Ridgway Sr. and Arnold Ridgway. So the parallels are just piling up in a way that is just so wonderfully arranged by Colson Whitehead in terms of the original novel, and then Barry Jenkins and company in terms of this adaptation. So bravo. This is chapter 4, The Great Spirit. And now let's turn to chapter 5, which is written by Nathan C. Parker and directed by Barry Jenkins. And this is titled Chapter 5, Tennessee Exodus. And so we understand too that, again, based upon the events of the previous chapters, that there is, at this point, Arnold Ridgway and Homer and some other characters that we meet have apprehended and captured Cora, as well as we have Cora and another slave that has been captured, who is Jasper. And now they are on the trek back, or Arnold Ridgway and company are now attempting to return to Georgia, to the place of origin of the series. And so that brings them through Tennessee, thus giving rise to the title Tennessee Exodus. So they're here. Well, we have uh, really, again, the intensification or the intensifying of the physical and emotional torture that these characters, Cora and some other characters, Jasper, are undergoing. It's it's done so, I think, artistically and to the point where it's almost. I mean, this is true for other episodes as well. It's so done so effectively, very intense, sometimes very difficult to watch and to undergo in terms of a viewing. But it's very important in terms of understanding, getting a better understanding of Cora's plight as well as that of other characters that we meet. And here we have another character, that being Jasper. Uh, and we see too, again, the residue of the previous chapter, The Great Spirit, and how his feelings, Arnold Ridgway's feelings now, grown up as an adult in form of Joel Edgerton's performance, how he feels about his father even when he is maybe egged on in a certain way. And so there is still an intense, almost maybe rivalry or maybe hatred, I'm not sure, but there is an intensity of wanting to be accepted on the one hand, but also understanding that there is a confrontational aspect between father and son, um, and then also to not just not just this relationship between father and son, and not just the relationship between Cora and all the people that she has met along the way, including chapter 5, and all the ghosts that maybe haunt her. That might be one way of looking at it. But also the interesting aspect of, which I haven't touched upon until now, the relationship between Ridgway and Homer. This is really, really fascinating. And the devotion that Homer has to Ridgway in the context of slavery in the South, in the context of how African Americans are viewed by a number of people in the South, as we meet a number of white people along the way. You know, Ridgway is a white man, and Homer is a black boy, a young black boy, and in this context, they have a bond that is seemingly so strong as to be unbreakable. And we wonder why this is, and we wonder what is the reason behind Homer's devotion to Ridgway on the one hand, and also too Ridgway's devotion to Homer on the other. And this, we get some ideas or glimpses of this throughout this episode, and maybe we will see this expanded upon to come. Again, this is making for real nuanced wrinkles throughout the story, The Underground Railroad. Which is fascinating too. And I love too the parallel here between the movement and motion. You know, we've had this idea of the railroad, the underground tunnels and the tracks and the railroad having a sense of magical realism on the one hand, but also a sense of journey towards something. But then we have in this episode a journey as well, but the journey is it doesn't have any of those traits of the magic sense of the potential of freedom of the Underground Railroad, almost the fantasy-like excitement of what those scenes have engendered, let's say, throughout the chapter so far. Here we have a journey back, which is desolate, which is almost apocalyptic, which has a sense of the doomed nature of it. And I think also it's to do with the decor and ambiance and environment of the trek back, and the almost the frightening nature of the outdoors that we see Ridgway and company essentially traverse throughout this chapter. But also the doomed nature, or the potential doomed nature, in terms of returning to Cora's own story. She is now captured again, and she is no longer free. She has been captured. And also we have Jasper as well in his story and what happens to him in this episode, which also gives a further sense of weight and perhaps guilt, whether unfounded or not. Again, that's up to us as we view Cora's own journey to decide. But it's, again, compounding the sense of grief, loss, and tragedy, while also getting a sense of how much this journey has been affecting Korra. We really get a sense of that as well in this chapter. This is also so powerful, brilliant stuff. So this is chapter 5, Tennessee, Exodus. So now we have chapter 6, which is titled Tennessee Proverbs, and this is written by Nathan C. Parker and Barry Jenkins, and then directed by Barry Jenkins. And so we have now the previous chapter where we saw a young Arnold Ridgway and his interactions with his father. And now in this chapter, we have an older Arnold Ridgway and more interactions with his father, or what has happened to his father at this point in time. And so we have the return home, maybe a brief return, as the case may have it, but the return home, or the visit home, by Ridgway, and we understand what is happening to Ridgway Sr., and who is at this point very sick, and perhaps very to the point of dying. And therefore we also see Mac, an old face from the past, a very complex relationship between Mac and Arnold Ridgway. But also we see too just how much Mac and perhaps even others have devoted themselves to Ridgway Sr., have loved him and have respected him, and therefore there might be a resentment in terms of how they see Arnold Ridgway's resentment of the father. And so this also comes to a head perhaps quite suddenly and quite abruptly in this episode as it progresses. But we also see moments where the relationship between Arnold Ridgway and Homer has certain interesting turns as well. There's a kind of father-son relationship that is developing, or has already developed perhaps, between Homer and Arnold Ridgway and Homer as well, again adding to the further complexity and fascinating nature of this part of the story, the Underground Railroad. And also we see too what happens in terms of Korra. She is in captivity, but maybe things will happen that will cause her to again be able to escape these shackles, because she is in shackles. She's in chains here. It's a very degrading, very disrespectful state that she is finding herself in. But perhaps there might be a possibility of hope as the chapter turns, and my goodness, where it goes from here, it's quite fascinating indeed. So this is chapter 6, Tennessee Proverbs. Chapter 7 is called Fanny Briggs, and it's written by Jehan Crowther and directed by Barry Jenkins. And this is one of the shorter episodes in terms of the running time. It's actually quite short, which is an interesting surprise, but I don't think it takes away any of its power. It is a very powerful episode because, in fact, it is an episode that is returning us to the events of a previous chapter, that being chapter 3, North Carolina. Because as we recall, the events of North Carolina, chapter 3, North Carolina, was such that we didn't know what happened to this character of Grace, and we thought perhaps something quite terrible in terms of Grace. Some kind of terrible fate confronting Grace, but that was unknown, and it's also unknown to Korra. Well, here in this chapter 7, Fanny Briggs, we get an answer as to what happened to Grace, and so it's a kind of follow-up, a direct sequel, if you will, to chapter 3, North Carolina, but again from Grace's point of view. And we see also what happens in terms of the aftermath of a lot of the violence that we saw portrayed in that chapter 3. And also we see a lot of the darkness of the aftermath of that episode, but also I get a sense of hope and resilience. And I think this is really important too, because throughout the series, it's been it's a really powerful series. It's also been a series that has a lot of downs to it, a lot of heavy moments that are just emotionally pummeling in terms of the tragedy that befalls the characters that we have come to know and love, and specifically Korra all the way. And so, any moment that we can get in terms of a possibility of hope possibility of some kind of escape or chance. I think it's very welcome from a kind of dramatic turn point of view, and so we get a sense of that perhaps here, not just with the return of a character from an earlier chapter, but also what we understand happens to her, and also the name, which I think is very important and significant. And I'll speak to about that when we talk about the commentary track. So. And then, of course, again, a re-emphasis on the notion of the Underground Railroad and how it as it's handled in this series and how it interacts with what happens to Grace here. So chapter 7, Fanny Breaks. It's another great one. I mean, they're all great, but this is just another one of those. So chapter 7, Fanny Breaks. Chapter 8 is called Chapter 8, Indiana Autumn, and this is written by Jacqueline Hoyt and directed by Barry Jenkins. So we have the what we understand happened at the climax of not chapter 7, but actually chapter 6, Tennessee Proverbs, in terms of an escape for Cora, and that brings us to Cora and a new community, and we understand this is in Indiana, and Valentine Farm, and we understand too that one of the people that we met at the climax of chapter 6, which helped to aid in Cora's escape from Ridgeway at the time. One of those men is Royal. And Royal is a leading member of this community, Valentine Farm, which is a farm, which is a community of freed or escaped slaves, African American people here as part of this community, only black people here in this community, which is a very key part of how this community is able to thrive and prosper and be protected, because they have the protection of the local authorities or the local judge or magistrate in not being invaded or not being searched. They have a sense of a kind of they have a sense of their own maybe independence in a manner of speaking. And in that way, through certain tactics that are employed in order to maintain that sense of protection, they are able to have a sense of life and livelihood and prosperity. And that also is a financial and economic prosperity. It's also religious prosperity. It's also, I think, a social and cultural and emotional prosperity too. And so we have Cora newly introduced into this world, and what's fascinating is, I mean, there are many fascinating aspects of it, but two examples from my point of view are, one, we have how this community is seen to be operating, and the hope that's seeming that we see on display here by a lot of people. And the way in which the many characters that we meet here have a sense of dignity and self-dignity. They have a sense of nurturing and nurturing nature to them. And also there's a really fascinating way that language is employed. And there's one point where Cora, who's still new to this world, is using language. And she's very gently chided for this, but because she's caught using language. She didn't mean to do it on purpose, but she's caught using language that is very much part of slavery mentality, kind of very using terms that are very maybe derogatory, but she doesn't understand it because this is the language that she knows, that being surrounded by, being the subject of this derogatory language, so she used it naturally. But there's a point early on where she is reminded that she shouldn't use that type of language, as a reminder to her and also to us that a lot of the road to recovery for Cora and others is also the way in which they can, and Cora can, achieve and maintain their sense of self-dignity. And that takes time. And so we understand, therefore, through this chapter, it's a wonderful reminder about how, it's a real powerful reminder about how freedom, it's not just a physical freedom, but it's also an emotional freedom. And that those steps don't come immediately, but they take time. The repairing of a damaged damaged soul. It takes time and it doesn't happen overnight. And that is also, that's one aspect, but then it leads into the second fascinating aspect, I think, of this episode, which is the intimate story of Cora, right? Because her journey of recovery is not going to happen immediately. It will take time. And that journey also is reckoning with guilt of the past and the people that she has met before. Also reckoning with how she can, if at all, open herself emotionally again. And that's also maybe revealing a little bit about where she is coming from and her background to the community. Also, who she is emotionally, and will she accept the affections of Royal, who is very obviously wanting to have an intimate emotional relationship with her. And is she able to do this? Or is her road to recovery something that even things like that will take even more time, which is a very understandable and very, I think, very reasonable place for Cora as a character to be. And it's lovely too to see her reticent, or not lovely, but it's really powerful to see how she is trying to break free of her reticence, but maybe it's something is holding her back. There is a sense of, will she able to gain her sense of self-dignity, or maybe will something hold her back, and how that will affect Royal and his feelings about Cora, and how that will affect the relationship with Cora and others in the community. And also too, we have to remember that this is a community that is, I mean, it seems very idyllic, but will that idyllic nature last, or maybe will there be threats or external forces that are bent on destroying that idyllic nature? And will Cora and what it is that she's done in the past, in particular chapter 1, will that past come back not just to haunt her, but will it come back to threaten the very livelihood and existence of this seemingly idyllic place called Valentine Farm? So this is, again, part of the proceedings. Wonderfully shot. The beauty and flow of this drama, it's so powerful indeed. And again, I mentioned before, maybe in chapter 7, Fanny Briggs, here we get that sense of hope again. And in a story, in a series where we've had a lot of tragic beats, a lot of cruel depictions, a lot of the terrible anxiety and the powerfully told, yes, but it's incredibly dark, goes in incredibly dark places. When we get moments of light and shining like this, it makes us, right, even more, I mean, not even more, but it makes us right, want to see things end this way, or perhaps feel like the dramatic tension will find a certain sense of positive resolution, and we are attracted to that way. At least I feel that way as well. So but we also understand that this is chapter 8, and there are, to my count, 2 more chapters to go. So in any event, this is chapter 8, Indiana Autumn. So now let's go to chapter 9, which is written by Barry Jenkins and directed by Barry Jenkins. And this is called chapter 9, Indiana Winter. And so where there is an autumn in terms of the success and harvest, sort of emotional awakening, if you will, or the hopes of an emotional awakening that was hinted at in the previous chapter. Now I think we have a resolution in terms of Cora's own journey. There was, again, I mentioned before about how the road to recovery, kind of spiritual and emotional recovery in the context of Cora's own journey, it takes time. Some time seems to have passed between the events of chapter 8 and the events of this chapter, or the opening of chapter 9, but it seems like Cora is willing and able, and perhaps wanting to find a sense of belonging and also emotional fulfillment. And that has to do with how she is opening up her to the community, and also how she is willing to and with her own choice make a connection with Royal. And so this becomes a very key part of the outlook on this, and it seems like it's going in a direction that may prove emotionally fruitful and gratifying, and indeed finding a place of salvation for Cora and others that we have been so longing for as we've seen this film, or this work, excuse me, from the first chapters up to just chapter 9. And so there are those continuations. This is a sequel in a way. I mean, they're all connected, of course, but this is a kind of direct sequel from the previous chapter in that way. But it's autumn and winter. But we also have to remember that there are other characters in this world of the Underground Railroad. Included, of course, is Ridgway and Homer. And if we recall the events of Tennessee Proverbs, we understand that yes, there is Ridgway, who is still on the hunt. He is in pursuit, and Homer, the ever devoted Homer, is right there with him. So this is the duo. They won't give up. They are relentless, and this brings them to understanding what this community is, Valentine Farm, and then running into difficulties into how they are able to essentially penetrate the defenses of Valentine Farm. And so they are confronted with a lot of the legal mechanics that at first seem to perhaps prevent him and others of wanting to search the farm and essentially destroy the idyllic nature of the farm, or perhaps from Ridgway's perspective, more specifically, to essentially find Cora, and from his point of view, not just find Cora, but unlock the secrets of the Underground Railroad, because this is also something that has still been simmering in the air, right? The Underground Railroad. I mean, we saw it in terms of Royal and the others, and Cora at the end of chapter 6, and also in chapter 7 with Fanny Briggs, and also bringing us to chapter 8 and chapter 9, sort of the current destination of the Underground Railroad trip. And so, but all the way, we've also had Arnold Ridgway not just trying to find Cora, but also find the secrets of the Underground Railroad, because after all, he is a slave hunter, and part of his own journey is to find and essentially destroy one of the root causes of the ways in which slaves were able to escape in this world of the Underground Railroad. And so all this seems to be coming to a head in this chapter 9, Indiana Winter. So there is a lot on the line on this chapter. There's a lot that happens in this chapter in terms of the idyllic nature that might seem to be on the precipice of crumbling at the very moment. We hope it won't happen, and we pray it won't happen. Will it happen, or will it not happen? Again, we'll have to watch the chapter to find out. But it is again, in terms of the emotional highs and lows of this series. I mean, this chapter 9, I think encapsulates it so powerfully and so effectively. It makes for really compelling viewing indeed. So, and then the way in which it seems to be tying to other moments that we've seen before. I'm specifically reminded of some key imagery that we saw at the very start of the series, chapter 1. We might see flourishes of that as this chapter closes out. But in any event, wow, this in many ways is perhaps the climax of the series, although there's one other chapter to go, which is also very key as well. But in any event, right now, chapter 9, Indiana Winter. Now we come to the final chapter that was broadcast or part of the series, The Underground Railroad. Chapter 10, Mabel. And I mentioned before how this series has this deft and brilliant and genius way it seems to be interweaving time and space, while giving us at the same time this really concrete through line of a trajectory of the character of Cora. That's really giving us a sense of parallels, much like the parallel nature of tracks themselves. I don't know, but so many tracks, so many lines that are interweaving with each other. Again, that jump from time and space. And here we have, well, earlier in the series, we had chapter 4, The Great Spirit, which jumped back in time, telling us about Ridgway Sr. and Arnold Ridgway. Here in chapter 10, we have what one might call the parallel to that, a spiritual sequel to that, which is Mabel. And we jump back in time. We are back in Georgia, and we see Mabel, who is the mother of Cora. We also see young Cora as a young girl in this story, back on the plantation. And we see a number of characters and faces that we are reminded of back from chapter 1. And a number of places too, and even down to things like the plantation, the building, some of the people that emerge, a little bit younger versions of them. Also things like swamps and the like. So, but this is the story of Mabel, for the most part anyway. And we see Mabel as a woman who is really struggling and doing her very best in this world that is still confronting her with so much cruelty, so much emotional intensity. And there is a subplot or a plot involving childbirth of a fellow, another slave, a woman who is undergoing some very intense and quite severe physical and emotional situations involving childbirth that brings Mabel to directly to be involved in this subplot. And we see how this takes an emotional toll on Mabel. We also see how Mabel's trying to protect everyone and protect these people from the vicious and cruel nature of the plantation owners, while also getting a lot of severe criticism and backlash from the people that she's seemingly trying to protect, while also trying to be a good mother to Cora, while also trying to find some kind of semblance of maybe normality isn't the right phrase, but trying to find a semblance of a type of dignity that you can tell she truly believes in, and she is trying her utmost, even beyond, maybe sometimes beyond what she is capable of. She's still trying to help in the best way that she can. So Mabel as a mother figure, as this legendary figure who has been in the background almost in the minds of Cora and Ridgeway, and perhaps to us as well, but we have seen her from the very start of the series. Now she is given a full prominence front and center. And we also understand too from the series, or from this episode or chapter, not just her emotional and her emotional arc and her relationship with Cora, and also what happens to Mabel as well as one of the mysteries of this series. What happened or what happens to Mabel? We get an answer to this, and how this relates directly to Cora's own journey. And it's another brilliantly conceived through line of this. And I mentioned the parallel with Cora because we also get the resolution to a certain degree of Cora's story, Cora's journey, which we have seen from chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to the very end of chapter 9. And now we get the resolution of Cora's journey. It has been a long journey, and perhaps when we see it, we as viewers might think this is the resolution, this is the end. Maybe for others, we might sense there's something beyond this. If you feel that there's something beyond this, whether that thing that is beyond has a sense of salvation and protection and freedom, or whether the pursuit and the cruelty and the injustice will continue on. Again, it's up to you to decide as you watch the series from beginning to middle to the very end right now. But I mean, this chapter is a great example of just overall how great this series has been. It gives us a sense of the structure, the literary genius of the way things are connected, the interconnectivity of lives and places and people, and of parents and children, generations to generations, the things that compel these characters to do what it is they do, the weaknesses that they might confront them, the cruelties, the external cruelties that also confront them, and also the strength that these characters have in moving on and just trying to do something in terms of the dignity of others and also the dignity of themselves. And we see that shown in the story of Mabel. We see those echoes and how they're connected with the story of Cora and others that we meet along the way. So in terms of an ending to the series, this one is, I mean, it's a brilliant ending to a brilliant series. So yes, this is Chapter 10, Mabel. The Criterion Collection has released this series, The Underground Railroad, on this 4-disc Blu-ray set, and this set is at spine number 1223. This is purported to be based on what is described as a 4K digital master approved by co-writer director Barry Jenkins with Dolby Atmos soundtrack, with an alternate stereo soundtrack as well being made available. I've removed one of the inserts, which is a fold-out, which has certain information about the casting credits and an essay and acknowledgement and production credits as well. Please note that I didn't find any notes about the master or presentation, etc. This is a series, an Amazon Prime series from 2021. And so, much like many other, releases by Criterion of the past year or so, there isn't any information about how this was restored or materials used to restore it, etc. So it's not in the case of a recent release like the Underground Railroad. So there aren't any notes in that respect. But I've never seen this series in the theater or projected on a big screen. I've only seen it on my television screen. Shown on the Blu-ray here. I do understand it is also made available via streaming service. But watching it on the Blu-ray, again, I think it's well captured, visually arresting, very stunning. The sonic, the sounds and the music quality is also very high indeed. And so I have no complaints at all when it comes to the way this looks and sounds. And now let me go through the supplements that are found within this set by Criterion. So once again, it's 4 discs. So we have Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 on Disc 1, and then we have Chapter 3, 4, 5 on Disc 2, and then Chapter 6, 7, 8 on Disc 3, and then Chapters 9 and 10 on Disc 4. So they're all spread out. 2 chapters on discs 1 and 4, and then 3 chapters on discs 2 and 3. Okay, yes. So, and also the supplements, in terms of actual, well, there are supplements that are found on discs 1 and 4. There isn't any separate supplements on discs 2 and 3, so to keep that in mind. So I'm just going to talk therefore about the supplements that are found on the discs overall. I should mention, however, at the outset that there is also a commentary track that is for all of the episodes. And this is one of the fascinating things about this set, which is already very fascinating. But let me explain here. So I have disc 1 in the machine, and it's Underground Railroad in Chapter 1, Georgia, Chapter 2, South Carolina. And then there's something called Commentary Intro. So Commentary Intro it's called Commentary Hub, and it's approximately 2 minutes. And this is a voiceover discussion or introduction to the commentary by Barry Jenkins himself. This is really interesting. So according to Barry Jenkins, he gave commentary tracks for all of the episodes, and actually there are some episodes where he's also joined by the editor and a cinematographer. Not for all of them, but for some of them. But all of them do feature Barry Jenkins, either alone or accompanied by some other of the production artists. But in any event, what he said was, you watch the series in the order of the chapters, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And so it's very tempting to watch the series with the commentary track in the same order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But what Barry Jenkins is saying here is, in fact, his preferred order that we listen to his commentary track is actually not in the sequential chapter order, but it's in a different order. And that's due to the fact that the sequence of the production of the chapters is the order in which he'd like us to listen to. So what he means is that the series wasn't made in the order of the chapters. It wasn't like the Chapter 1 story was made first and then Chapter 2 was made first. According to Barry Jenkins, in fact, it was in a different order. And so he therefore would like, he recommends that we listen to his commentary in the order of that production schedule. And so it's actually mentioned if we go in another area, we go to Chapter 1, Georgia, and we press this, and there's an explanatory note about the commentary overall, which says, this commentary track recorded in 2023 features director, co-writer, and showrunner Barry Jenkins. Jenkins' preferred listening order starts with Chapter 2, followed by 1, 10, 8, 9, 3, 7, 5, and 6, and ending with 4. To listen to the commentary while viewing this chapter, press the audio key on your remote at any time. So that's the preferred order. And again, we also get the reason why in the commentary hub, the commentary intro. And also there's a little bit of comments in the commentary tracks themselves by Barry Jenkins. And so I listened to all the commentary tracks. And I must say, so uh, most of them are with Barry Jenkins alone, but there are some where he is joined um, by um, uh, James Laxton and also uh, by Joy McMillan. And so, in terms of the uh, James Laxton's cinematography and also the Joy McMillan's editing. And so it's interesting to hear James Laxton's comments and Joy McMillan's comments as well. They speak from their perspectives. James Laxton's talking, for instance, in some of his commentary comments about how he wanted to capture the intimate versus the sort of epic sweep of the vistas and nature. Joy McMillan's comments too about editing choices and also some surprises that she had as well in terms of when Joy McMillan was visiting the set. That was also seeing Colson Whitehead, the author of the original novel as well, which is really interesting. Seeing how Colson Whitehead was reacting to his work being created in terms of this miniseries adaptation. So, also too, James Laxton's comments with Barry Jenkins too, are talking about how there's a lot of structure in terms of the way the stories were planned or pre-planned, but also it was really a great surprise to I think both of them and everyone concerned about how there's also room for improvisation, or maybe not improvisation per se, but what they call fluidity in terms of breaking free from that structure, and that had to do with trying to adapt to the needs of the environment at the time of shooting, locations versus set shooting, time constraints, scheduling, budget concerns, also the needs of the actors as well. Maybe that called for something that broke free from the pre-planned structure and then creating something that was more fluid. And so that's a really interesting take. And that also has to do with not just, again, from Barry Jenkins's point of view in his commentary track, not just the way that things were shot, but also the actual episode structures themselves. Because according to Barry Jenkins, there's actually the stories, the chapters that were arranged initially were some parts were changed. You know, there were some episodes that were planned to be two separate episodes, which then were combined into one, and then there was another episode that suddenly came into being. That wasn't planned in advance, etc. And also there was another chapter, an 11th chapter that could have been filmed that wasn't. There was actually a little there is a hint of what that chapter could have been in one of the shots of the Underground Railroad. There's a mural or painting in one of the stations of the Underground Railroad that we see that is suggestive of what that 11th chapter could have been. I'll speak a little bit about the 11th chapter, in fact, when we talk about another of the supplements from the Criterion release. But in any event, Genesis. But in any event, so a lot of this too was in terms of Barry Jenkins and how he approached the material as he describes it in the commentary tracks. So a lot of the fluidity of was necessitated also by the budget and how at the very the start of the production they had a lot of luxury in terms of budget, but as the production went on, right, obviously the money started to run out, so their limitations were increasing as they were proceeding from the beginning, middle to the end, and also that perhaps necessitated certain editing choices and the like. But also, it made sense. Makes perfect sense. I mean, there isn't any sense of, say, the last chapters of there isn't any sense at all of the last chapters feeling any less budgeted than the earlier chapters. You know what I mean? But there's this way which everything feels so organically connected, which is really amazing. But to understand that there were these concerns behind the scenes, I think, is also very fascinating, and also it lends itself. It just shows just how creative Barry Jenkins and company really were, and not just creating this and imagining this, but really putting it together and finishing it in the powerful way that they were able to. So. Um, and there are also details too about how things are parallel to each other, and how, for instance, certain scenes that might have been separated by time and space actually were shot in the same day, which is interesting. And to seeing how the performers were responding, Joel Edgerton and others, how they were responding to their performances, and how they were interacting with the other characters as well. lighting setups, camera sometimes aspect ratio might change as well, um, and also just talking to you about shooting some of the intense scenes, making sure there was mental health support as well, because as I mentioned, some of the scenes were really, really intense, and I can only imagine the intensity that the actors must have been feeling as they were preparing for these scenes and actually interacting with these and preparing and performing them, etc. So yes, so this is the commentary track uh, with some episodes joined by Joy McMillan and James Laxton, and then but always with Barry Jenkins. So really fascinating. So if you're interested in listening to the commentary track, I listened to the commentary track, and I don't think it's absolutely necessary to listen to it in the order that Barry Jenkins prefers. I don't think so. I mean, I listened to it, and I think one can still enjoy the commentary track if you watch it in the order of the chapters. So, but I can totally understand what Barry Jenkins is saying in terms of his preferred commentary. And he does mention it. It's one of the later points. He says, I recorded my commentary for chapter 1 on a Wednesday, and then I recorded, chapter 2 on a Tuesday or Thursday or something like that. So he does mention the order in which he recorded them, and it is in the order of his preferred order. Also, to wait to the end, there's a lovely little bit. We understand, I know that Barry Jenkins is a big fan of the Criterion Collection, and he mentions at the very end of the commentary track, I think among other things, he says, if you're still here, if you're still listening to the commentary track, thank you so much. He mentions that. So, and then he also says something about how he really loved how the Criterion Collection he mentions his Criterion Collection DVDs and how they had all these great commentary tracks, and so it's wonderful that he's able to share one here as well. So it's wonderful to see that as well. So anyway, the commentary track for the Underground Railroad, it is as epic as the series itself, so you got to check it out. And so now let's continue with the other supplements that are found with this Criterion set, the Underground Railroad, the 4-disc Blu-ray disc set. So as I mentioned, the supplements, the commentary tracks will be found with all the episodes, which will be found spread across the 4 discs. But in terms of the supplements, the separate supplements, you'll only find those with discs 1 and 4. They won't be on, there won't be any supplements on discs 2 and 3, at least my understanding. So I have first up disc 1. So let's look at the disc 1 supplements. So going down, we've already talked about the commentary intro. So going next, we have deleted scenes. So this is statement from Barry Jenkins. The deleted scenes included here are like additional patches on the larger quilt of the Underground Railroad. In all, they represent a quality of Coulson's novel that I always found striking. At any moment, for any character, a fascinating scene is playing out, and that play commands our vision. Well said. I like that very much. And so what these are deleted scenes. There's an index which takes you into a description of the deleted scenes. So let me just go through them very quickly. Chapter 1, Francis confronts Caesar. Chapter 1, Hob your home. Chapter 1, They break us all. Chapter 1, Francis in the garden. Chapter 2, Commercial. Chapter 2, Tubal Ligation. Chapter 3, Reading Martin's Diary. Chapter 3, Martin's Story. Chapter 5, Campfire Wake Up. Chapter 8, Meeting Sam Again. Chapter 9, Homer Meets Clem. Chapter 9, Homer's Coat. Chapter 10, Throw Me Anywhere, Lord. So those are the deleted scenes that are included here. They are perhaps, each scene is maybe ranging from 2 minutes, 3 minutes, close to 4 minutes, some scenes might be. And then there are other scenes that are very short, maybe less than a minute, around 30 seconds or so. So varying in length, but around the minute to 2-3 minute mark, something like that. I don't want to go into too much detail, again, just to preserve, I think it's watching the deleted scenes, I think it's first beneficial to watch the series, and then you can watch the deleted scenes. But I can say that they do add interesting character developments that are hinted at in the series, but when you watch with these scenes, oh my goodness, they make even, I mean, they are more revelations into who these people are, and also some twists and turns as well in terms of what happens to some of the characters that might have had very, very little running time, but they are still not forgotten. And details too, again, things that are I think it they still feel very consistent and organic with the overall work and mood of the series Underground Railroad. So these are nice little nuggets of surprise. So I'm very happy with these. I guess my only wish would have been that it would have been nice if there could have been a play all button. If you play all, then you can watch all of the scenes on one continuous watch without having to stop and then select the next chapter, the next scene, and then stop it. And it's like here, it's one of those things where when one deleted scene is selected, you only watch that scene, and when it stops, you have to go back and select another menu, another scene from the menu, which is a little bit cumbersome. But so I wish there could have been a play all button. But that's okay. It's a minor criticism in this presentation. I think overall it's very revelatory. So I do like that very much. So that's deleted scenes. Next we have teasers. And these are teasers or mini trailers, promotional trailers to the series Underground Railroad. And it's described as, in 2021, Barry Jenkins created these 7 teasers for the Underground Railroad for expressive rather than promotional purposes. He discusses his creative impulses behind them in the accompanying introduction. So when I press index, there's introduction, and then there's fire for the kindling, floating Ms. Reva, resurrection piano, searching evolution, thinking music, and wormhole. The introduction is approximately 3 minutes, by the way, by Barry Jenkins. So this is really cool. This is really cool. What Barry Jenkins has done here is he's not treating them like teaser trailers per se, but they're in their way almost like their own mini movies that have a same spiritual connection, their own maybe prequels or sequels in a way to the Underground Railroad. They're almost their own separate episodes to the Underground Railroad itself, which is really cool. It kind of reminds me of a film by Alfred Hitchcock called Rope from the 1940s, and there's a trailer that is for the film Rope. And in fact, the trailer for Alfred Hitchcock's Rope is almost like a prequel to the story of Rope itself, which is interesting. It's an interesting way in which the trailer and the film have this in connection. Well, I have a similar kind of vibe with these teasers and their relationship with the series itself. And there's also a film that is, there's a separate short film that's found on the disc 4 of this release, which we'll talk about later, called The Gaze. And so there's some interesting connective tissue between the teasers and also the work The Gaze, which itself is connected with the Underground Railroad, which is really great. I must say, by the way, if you're interested, I think my favorite of these, they're all great, by the way, but I think my favorite of the teasers has to be the last one, which is called Wormhole. Talk about a mind-blowing experience. You gotta see that one. Yeah, that's my favorite one, I think, of the bunch. But anyway, these are their own little mini Barry Jenkins movies right here. So it's great. So these are teasers. Really wonderful. It's approximately 1 minute or so each. And so also Barry Jenkins gives credit to Daniel Morphesis in terms, and also in terms of the in terms of music by Nicholas Britell as well, also from the series, as well as giving the musical choices here are outstanding. I should mention too, I forgot to say, I love the musical choices here. Some of them are songs, pre-existing songs, also original compositions are used. There's some compositional points where one of my favorite composers is Philip Glass, and there's not all, but there's some moments that feel very Philip Glass-esque, which I loved. I absolutely loved. So, and it has this bombastic quality in some parts, and this melancholy, contemplative aspect in other parts. Oh, it's so great. And that music is obviously reflected too in the teasers. So please check it out if you can. So this is the teasers. That is another part of the supplements on disc 1. Okay, so now I have disc 4 in the machine. Once again, discs 2 and 3 don't have any supplements on them. It's just the episodes, 3, 4, 5, and then 6, 7, 8 respectively. So disc 4 has episodes 9 and 10, and then it has some supplements that are part of that. So what are those supplements? So first up is The Gaze. What is The Gaze? According to this, it says, Barry Jenkins made The Gaze, A Companion to the Underground Railroad in 2021. He discusses his creation of that work in the new introduction presented here. So, this is a film, this is a short film. It's approximately 52 minutes, something like that. And so it is really fascinating. And also, Barry Jenkins gives his comments as to why he made this work, The Gaze, and what is it about, and how it connects with the Underground Railroad. He gives his comments in the introduction, which itself is approximately 6 minutes. Um, uh, this is a companion work to the Underground Railroad. It is a maybe a kind of love letter to the people that appear in the Underground Railroad, both prominent characters in the work, also people that are background characters in the periphery, almost walk-ons, anyone who is part of the world of the Underground Railroad. What Barry Jenkins and company have done here, and what they've done is James Laxton and Daniel Morphesis. What they've done is they've taken moments of say when they're making the episodes or the chapters of the Underground Railroad. What Barry Jenkins initially needed was he needed to see how the costumes looked on the people that were wearing them in the world of the Underground Railroad. And so there was this need to have essentially screen tests or right, how they would look on camera. But then what this meant was this also developed into an idea of, let's take characters that are in the Underground Railroad. They'll stand in the center of the frame and they'll look at the camera. They'll look at us. And Barry Jenkins will have the camera move towards them slowly on a dolly and then move back as a kind of living, moving portrait of who these people were and are. Not just in the context of the Underground Railroad, but also giving them life in this way, but also giving us the chance as viewers to look at them and also to have them look back at us. And the way that Barry Jenkins describes it in the introduction is, among other things, this is a way for him to allow the people of the world of the Underground Railroad to show themselves to us. I think it was a really powerful way of describing it. And also in terms of Barry Jenkins' own feelings about his own life and his own family history and his own lineage, and wanting to, in his words, talk with and speak with his ancestors and the people that are that he shares strong bonds with. I mean, and so this is also his way personally of connecting with the people that are shown in this world of the Underground Railroad. I think it's also that has a real heartfelt tribute quality to this work, The Gaze. And when you watch the film The Gaze, it is these are moving portraits of many characters, and they're edited together in this way with the music over it. And most of the time it's the dolly going in and then going out on characters. Sometimes the camera might be sweeping from left to right or from right to left. Sometimes you might have a dolly in and that might be end of it. Sometimes it might just be a close-up and then going into a dolly out, maybe keeping in focus. Sometimes it purposely goes out of focus, etc. These are really beautiful moving portraits. And the people that are part of the portrait, they are standing still. I mean, but they are moving. They are allowed to move. They are looking at each other, but they're asked to stand still as though they are posing for a photograph. All the while, people around them are walking back and forth, just like it's an everyday thing, which is such an interesting juxtaposition. I love that. It reminds us of a sense of I don't know, kind of the wonderful romantic antiquity of the notion of portrait taking and photograph taking on the one hand, but using the modern technology of 2021. And then also using that as a way in, as a window in for us, because we are asked to view them and they in turn are viewing us, which creates this really indestructible bond between spectator and subject. So, and again, it goes back to photography, which I think Barry Jenkins does mention in the introduction, which is this idea of cinema. What is cinema, or what is the art of looking? Which is the gaze, which is at the very heart of cinema, which is a great entry point into this work as well. And then I mentioned too, some characters, there might have been in the background in some of the episodes, but some other characters are really prominent. So it's wonderful to see this whole world come to life in this work, The Gaze, in this way. Some shots you might recognize. There are actually some shots that you might recognize in some of the teasers that were found in the supplements for Disc 1. There are some shots that you see in some of the deleted scenes. Some of the shots too in the actual chapter episodes themselves, you might see repeated or maybe different versions of, or maybe slightly edited versions or excerpted from the Gaze as well. So it's an interesting back and forth between the Gaze, the teasers, the deleted scenes, the actual chapters of the series, The Underground Railroad itself. So it's just filling out the world in a way that's so fascinating. So this is another Barry Jenkins work, the Underground Railroad related work, The Gaze, which is its own work, its own entity in and of itself. So really lovely. So I was so taken with this. I mean, the time flew so quickly. I love this. So this is The Gaze. And then Building the Underground Railroad. So this is a short, approximately 4-minute piece. I think it's an Amazon created supplement, and it's Barry Jenkins and company talking about the Underground Railroad conceit itself, right? Because as it's used in the story, it's actual tunnels and an actual track and its actual train. And so Barry Jenkins talks about how he really was enamored by this idea. You know, when he first learned about the Underground Railroad as history, growing up as a student, he actually envisioned, as he mentions at the start, actual trains and actual tunnels. So it was really a great opportunity for him to manifest that, to see that come to life in the context of the story, and also and how that they were able to achieve this technically. Because they're talking about real trains, antique trains that are these real size trains. So and how they had to build and construct the tunnels, etc. Oh, really great. And also too, there's a discussion a little bit about Genesis, the so-called 11th chapter that wasn't made for the series, but there's a little bit of comments about Genesis, and which we'll talk a little bit later in the supplement when we talk about other aspects of the Criterion release. So anyway, Building the Underground Railroad, approximately 4 minutes, so please check this out if you can. So, oh my goodness, I am just overwhelmed with excitement talking about this. I apologize if I can't control my excitement. I hope you can forgive me, but there's so much here in terms of the supplement. I'm so grateful for this. So there's the epic commentary track with Barry Jenkins and company. And then on disc 1 we had the deleted scenes, which themselves feel like its own separate Barry Jenkins work. Then we had the teasers, which had its own sense of Barry Jenkins, their own little Barry Jenkins mini movies. And then we have here on disc 4, we have The Gaze, which is its own little Barry Jenkins film. And then discussion about Building the Underground Railroad. So really lovely. Great set of supplements. Again, my minor criticism would be for disc 1 with all the deleted scenes and also the teasers. I wish there could have been a play all button. But that's okay. Very minor criticism indeed. I think it doesn't take away from how excited I am for experiencing this. And also just the way in which the series, The Underground Railroad, feels so interactive. It really feels interactive. There's so much on the off screen. There's so much here, there's so much there, and if we want to, we can experience it in this way. We don't have to, but if we want to, we can. And so I love how it has this interactive experience that this Criterion release allows us, the viewer, to join in and become part of this world called the Underground Railroad. So it's absolutely wonderful. And so now let us turn to the actual physical media release itself to conclude our conversation about this wonderful release called the Underground Railroad. So once again, the Criterion Collection's release is a 4-disc Blu-ray set in this plastic case, and I have the discs here, which is in this stacked fashion. And I've already removed, for purposes of this discussion here, the the inserts or the things that are included as part of this release, and we have two of them here. So let me address this first one here, which is the fold out, and among other things, it has great artwork that is also carrying over from the wonderful artwork design that is welcoming us with the well, that's the back here. I will talk about that in a moment. With the, here we go. Here's some of the artwork design here. In terms of Cora and Mabel, I love that the balance between the art that's part of the insert and also carrying over into the artwork design for the cover. In terms of production here, art directors Eric Skillman, Sarah Habibi, illustrator Tony Stella, designer Eric Skillman, art production coordinator William Braze, print production artist Craig Phillips, art assistant Julie Sussman. So I enjoy this very much here. This is really cool. And it has this, there's a mural-like quality to it as well, which is similar to, in many ways, certain paintings or murals that appear in key points of some of the episodes or chapters of the Underground Railroad. So really nice indeed, and I like the use of the font. This font is what's used in the chapters themselves. It has this way of the Underground Railroad and Chapter 1, Georgia, or something. I love how it just emerges on the screen like this. So it's the same font used. That's really wonderful. I'm sorry, let me just, before I move on to the other thing, let me say too that it is a fold out, which I'm not a big fan of. I wish it could have been the staple booklet, but what's so great about this is it has the essay. This is such a great essay, so informative. This is Angelica J. Bastien's essay called The Wound and the Remedy. And so again, talking so much about the parallels with the novel and the adaptation, which was also mentioned a little bit. I've neglected to say, I'm sorry. Barry Jenkins does mention a little bit about that in the commentary track as well, in terms of his approach to the Colson Whitehead novel. And also too, I forgot to mention, there are some interesting key connections with other works by Colson Whitehead and some of the other chapters, specifically Chapter 7. Fanny Briggs. So, and I wasn't familiar with that because I'm unfortunately I'm embarrassed to admit I'm not so familiar with the writings of Colson Whitehead as I should be. So, but in any event, I think that's very fascinating, and I think the essay makes a point of that, as well as some other points as well, in terms of the thematic arcs and the historical context and how Barry Jenkins handles matters like this so skillfully in the Underground Railroad, as well as other points that Angelica J. Bastien mentioned. So please check this out. This is The Wound and the Remedy essay here, which is absolutely wonderful. I'm sorry, I should say one thing I forgot to say, which is maybe another thing that would have been really, really helpful for me anyway, again, given my own limited knowledge on this, is if there had been a supplement maybe talking about Colson Whitehead or the novel, and maybe how the novel and the adaptation is similar and differed at the same time. I think that would have been really interesting in terms of an additional supplement as part of the supplements here. We don't get that, so I could see that could have been a real interesting option to at least consider. But oh well, that's okay. We do get some information about Colson Whitehead's novel in some of the commentary track comments, and then here in the essay as well. So, in any event, yes, this is just a great insert as part of this. So that's the insert. And then we have another treasure here, which is Underground Railroad Genesis. And what this is a little kind of graphic novel here, which is really cool. Absolutely cool. Now, there's an introduction here on this opening part of the insert or the booklet here about what this is, Chapter 11. As I mentioned too, the supplement called Building the Underground Railroad on Disc 4 does have some comments by Barry Jenkins about what Genesis was and how actually it's referenced specifically in one of the episodes of the Underground Railroad, or the chapters in one of the Underground Railroad episodes. But this is really great because this is the 11th chapter. This is essentially the prequel, how the Underground Railroad came to be, essentially, just giving the name meaning to the use of the word Genesis. This is really fascinating. Again, this is yet another way in which this Criterion release is so interactive. If you want to know what the 11th chapter could have been, you can read this and get a great sense of that. This is so cool. I should say here, this is written by Nathan C. Parker and Barry Jenkins, illustrated by Valentin de Landro, adapted and colored by Eric Skillman. So look at that. That's just the first page here. I don't want to give too much away. Oh God! Here's this the second and third pages. Look at that. That is so beautiful. So this is yet another way in which this is so interactive. I can't emphasize enough just how wonderful I think this is. This is really wonderful. So if you want to know what the 11th chapter could have been, you can get a great sense of that by reading this graphic novel adaptation called The Underground Railroad Genesis. So please check this out if you can. Let me now put these back into the case, which brings me to my final maybe criticism of the physical media releases. That so we've got this plastic casing, right, and we've got these two inserts, right, the fold-out insert and the great graphic novel, and they're supposed to go in something like this, right, so they're two stacked here, and then you're supposed to close the case like so. Well, I have trouble closing the case whenever I try to put the discs in. So as you can see, maybe it's just the fault of this particular copy that I have. Maybe your plastic case is better than mine. I don't know. But as you can see, when I try to put it in, I can't quite. This end here doesn't quite close all the way. So I don't want to damage the things inside, right? But I try to close it and it doesn't. So there we go. I have to close it, but then sometimes it pops out. I don't know, maybe it doesn't fit as there we go, it popped out again. There we go. So I have to pop it back in, but that, okay, c'est la vie. That's a very, very minor criticism of that, but I don't know if the casing is the absolute ideal sizing in terms of what is included in terms of the inserts, but oh well, it's not impossible to fit in, so I'll just have to make do with what I have, which is perfectly fine. I'm willing to accept that. But in any event, this is the Underground Railroad, Criterion's Underground Railroad release. My goodness, what a journey this has been. And thanks to this release, I know that I will continue on with this journey going forward. So this is Criterion's release of Barry Jenkins' The Underground Railroad. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great movies and series, including The Underground Railroad, including other works by Barry Jenkins, including other films and works in the Criterion Collection, and beyond. And so until the next video, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.